Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. Each week, we address issues of timely and timeless concern with newsmakers and the journalists who report on them, with artists, writers, scientists, educators, social scientists, government leaders. We speak to each one to one. I'm delighted to welcome Sarah Wexler to today's program. She's a staff writer at Allure Magazine. But the subject she tackles in her new book, Living Large, From SUVs to Double Ds, Why Going Bigger Isn't Going Better, is far from glamorous. It's an investigation into why Americans seem to need not only more of everything, but bigger versions of everything. The book has just been published by St. Martin's Press. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, Sheryl.
Your book is really about the American trend towards more and more conspicuous consumption, which is not exactly a new phenomenon. So why write the book at this point in time?
Well, you're right. It's been something that's basically started post-World War II and seemed to accelerate in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. So it wouldn't seem like it's super timely, except then the recession hit, where you would assume that this would be a wake-up call where people would stop consuming on such a massive level and we'd get a little less showy. But we actually, as an example, just set a new spending record for Black Friday this year. So it's showing that even in times of recession where you would think that we would slow down our consumption, it's kind of counterintuitive that we won't stop. And if anything, we're spending more.
And when I heard the Black Friday shopping numbers, on the one hand, you think, well, maybe it's a good sign because maybe things are getting better. But on the other hand, who knows? Right. You grew up in a family that rejected outward signs of affluence. Your parents were minimalists, vegetarians, environmentalists, sort of hippies in an affluent neighborhood. And then, did they get bitten by the bug?
Things definitely changed in my household. I was raised to live as small as possible. We were members of a CSA, community supported agriculture group, before that was really trendy and before green existed.
Did you compost?
We did compost yard waste.
Okay.
And then would use that for planting. So I was raised that way and lived that way, through college and trying to just minimize my impact as much as possible. And then one break, I came home for the holidays with my, to visit my family, and I noticed there was a big SUV parked in the driveway. There was bacon frying on the stove. There was a big screen TV, and everything had sort of supersized. So it was startling for me that my parents, who had raised me a certain way, had really changed. And I took note of it, especially in their neighborhood, which was mostly houses from the 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. A lot of those were being bought and bulldozed and replaced by McMansions with giant SUVs parked in the driveway. Our neighbors were members of a mega church. And all of that sort of got me thinking, and I went back and looked at my life and figured I'm driving, an SUV I don't really need. I was living in a home much bigger than what I needed just because I could afford it at the time. And I had a St. Bernard, which I think might be a little beside the point. But I looked at my own life and, I shopped at big box stores and sort of as entertainment when I was bored. So it really
So you had
got me thinking.
The whole family had been infected.
We had all been supersized, and that's part of what made me stop and look around, that if this was happening to us who had started on such the opposite end of the spectrum, I could see sort of the allure of it and decided to try to figure out, why are we doing this and what does it mean?
Now you work at Allure Magazine, which is all about selling makeup and hair and other beauty products, probably a lot of them overpriced and a lot of packaging. Did anything about the world that you work in make you, but I guess you wrote the book before you went to Allure, right?
Mm-hmm, I did.
But were you in the women's magazine, encourage women to buy world, and did anything about that make you want to look at this issue?
Right. Well, I worked at Mary Claire magazine before I was at Allure, another women's magazine, and I think that they're aware of the fact that we don't want women to buy just more, we want them to buy better. So the thing is sort of curating, like these are the 3 skirts you need this season, or these are the 2 lipsticks, and they'll be the best. So you don't have to buy 10 lipsticks looking for the best, sort of the way, we, try to serve the readers. But there is definitely that push of consumerism, and so much of our economy is based on consuming. So I'm not by any means saying nobody buy anything,
right?
But it's more about looking at your consumption and hitting the pause button and evaluating.
Right.
What you're
Very
doing.
interested in this group of women who have been encouraging women to. For a month, just to wear no more than 6 items of clothing, and see if you can get by.
Right.
And it's kind of interesting. So what aspect of our need for bigger and bigger things do you think appalled you most?
Let's see. I was really surprised about McMansions.
Okay.
Because the average size of an American family has shrunk since the 1950s. It went from 3.7 people per household to 2.6. But since the 1950s, the size of the average American home has gone up 140%. So we are definitely making a bigger footprint for our home. And even the American dream of owning your home, is such a long-lasting and iconic symbol of, the American dream. So I was wondering why the size of the house
So now
had
the dream is
changed
of
so
a
much.
much bigger house.
Right, it's
'Cause
not just
I know
own your own
that
home.
the house my parents bought in the 50s, it was maybe 1,000 square feet, maybe 1,200 the most.
Right.
A little bigger than my New York apartment. And now they're of course much larger. Now you talked about a friend of yours who moved from, I guess, New York into a McMansion.
Yeah.
Tell us about her.
So she was one of my friends in New York City who lived in, very nice apartment, and decided once she and her husband were going to have a baby, decided to move to the suburbs and ended up buying a McMansion. And I sort of couldn't see the appeal of it because she is someone who had lived small and is very cosmopolitan and stylish. And I sort of didn't understand what was appealing to her about a McMansion, which are so the same as one another. They're always identical, just about in their architectural details. And I didn't really understand the appeal, so I wanted to spend time with her in her home and see what she got out of it. And a lot of it, I realized through talking to her and also talking to landscape architects and economists, is that's what middle class or upper middle class people feel they need to do to get their kids in the right public schools. That to live in a neighborhood that has, the best public schools, that in those neighborhoods tend to be McMansions, because that's the trend of what upper middle class people are going for.
Okay. So it's the huge house on a little teeny tiny lot, basically.
Or a normal size lot, but the house is taking up,
Right.
a large part of it. So some counties in the country are trying to battle that by saying, your house can't take up more than 30% of your lot, or things like that.
And they're not well constructed.
No, they're known for being shoddily constructed. It really would be a different scenario if, these 5,000 to 8,000 square feet monstrous houses had beautiful architectural details and were constructed in, a really great way, but they basically are leaching greenhouse gases for 20 years. Because they're so big, even if you have, efficient windows and pipes, you still need to heat and cool a bigger space. So you're using so much more energy.
Okay. Now, I admit that I watched the Real Housewives shows on Bravo, and they feature a lot of women who are living large, even though apparently some of them can't afford it. You'll hear about a
Right.
foreclosure, that somebody was really renting this huge house with all of this furniture. On a recent, these were the housewives of Beverly Hills. On a recent show, one of the housewives gave a birthday party for her 1-year-old daughter that she spent $40,000 on. What's that about?
Right. I think that, we've long heard the expression keeping up with the Joneses. So I think that that's been something where we looked around our neighborhood or our workplace and said, okay, what are the people like me doing here?
And
Whereas
let me outdo them.
Exactly. Now the ante's really been upped with shows like The Real Housewives, or celebrity reality shows where you're seeing how the Kardashians live. MTV has a show, My Super Sweet 16, which are these $100,000 Sweet 16 parties, and that being, I think, pumped into our homes constantly. You have a new Jones family to compare yourself to, and it's, if they can have it, why can't I? And I think it makes that the new, if not the norm, at least the goal, the ideal situation would be to have that kind of party.
And certainly when you see the houses that the professional athletes have, it's like, why do you need I don't know, a 46, I don't know, why do you need an 8,000 square foot house with a bowling alley and a movie theater? And
it's not the White House, that should be the only house with a bowling alley and a movie theater.
Right. You write about, with the crash in the housing market, are some of these McMansions being foreclosed on?
They're being foreclosed on at a much higher rate, about 8 times the national foreclosure average. So people who made a gamble on their mortgages to reach for a McMansion are really in trouble now, because also nobody wants to buy a 10-year-old house, especially that hasn't been constructed really well.
It's different if you're buying a really nice Victorian,
Right. It's sort of in that middle section that nobody really wants, and they're not that much less expensive anymore than buying an older house that has beautiful construction, or if you're going to build a McMansion, build a new one is sort of the attitude, because they haven't aged very well. So a lot of those people are having trouble selling them, and then the kind of neighborhoods they're in have zoning rules a lot of times against subdividing them to sort of keep out lower income people. So it's hard, because then they oftentimes can't even subdivide and rent them out. So looking towards the future, some economists are predicting these big McMansion neighborhoods sort of becoming ghost towns, and you can already see in some of them, that have been foreclosed on, the lawns aren't being mowed, and that's where a lot of, teenagers are hanging out to do graffiti and
the
hang
tumbleweeds
out.
are blowing through.
Practically.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more with Sarah Wexler, author of Living Large, after the following message.
Here we go. What? What?
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent, because kids in foster care don't need perfection. They need you.
Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York, and I'm talking with Sarah Wexler, author of Living Large, From SUVs to Double Ds, Why Going Bigger Isn't Going Better. It's just been published by St. Martin's Press. I was really intrigued, by your chapter on megachurches, because I have often wondered what is people see in churches with a 20,000 person membership, as opposed to a nice, homey,
Intimate, right?
A group of congregation. What is it? What's the appeal?
Well, I went to services at a megachurch because I was equally confounded by, I thought, how do you feel connected to your pastor when there are 20,000 other people with you? But what I found in talking to some members of the church is they liked the feeling of support that 20,000 people who share your beliefs and ideology lends to you, that you have all of these people saying, yes, you're right, we support you, we agree with you. And then also they work really hard to have these smaller cells and groups within that feel intimate, that are 10 or fewer people, and really push people to have that feeling of intimacy that way. But it was really interesting to me in talking to people about the design of a lot of new megachurches that, I don't know if you've ever been to one, but they have sort of movie theater seats.
Right.
There are, no Bibles. Everything is projected onto big screens, and they have live rock bands. It's just a really different experience.
Entertainment. You talk about the entertainment aspect of it that has certain appeal.
It feels more like pop culture. A lot of them you can download their sermons on iTunes. It's more convenient. You know, they'll have 4 different service times. You can come wearing whatever you like.
Right.
So it's really catering to people. And in the design of a lot of the megachurches is they want them to feel more full. And look more full. So even when they are not filled to capacity, they want you to feel that way.
Now, and those churches seem to be compelled to get even larger. I mean, to you know, they're always this constant drive for more members, and sometimes more like satellite campuses. You know, a preacher will have a congregation in Atlanta, and they'll have a church in New York. Do you think that's about making money?
There is a lot of money in megachurches, and also members of megachurches tend to donate more than members of smaller churches.
Really?
They do. So there's a lot of money to be had, and a lot of the megachurches are using business like MBA capitalistic strategies of how to expand or sort of market their church.
Wow. Now, plastic surgery. We're not the only nation that's under the knife for women wanting bigger breasts and bigger butts. But why are we taking the rap for it?
Well, what I found is that certainly breast enlargement procedures are popular in other countries, in Asia, and especially in Brazil. But Americans still get more procedures than anyone else, and we get the largest size implants. And we have also, you know, stars like Heidi Montag getting size H implants as sort of the new icon of what plastic surgery sort of is. So I went for a consultation to sort of see what the allure is. And in each chapter, I really tried to put aside my preconceptions and try to earnestly understand what the appeal is and then what the impact is. And this one I had the hardest time putting aside my preconceptions. And I think part of that is working at women's magazines and pushing the idea of be happy with your body and who you are. And to me, this is pushing the opposite of that. So I sort of wanted to understand why go so big with implants. And everyone I spoke to, you know, the nurse, the receptionist, all said to me, go bigger than you think you're going to want. Go bigger, go bigger. And that was the message I heard the whole time.
And in fact, when you tried on some faux breasts to see how you'd look, you were kind of drawn in by it, weren't you?
I was seduced. In some of the chapters, I was horrified the whole time I was doing the research. And a few times I got seduced. And that was definitely one of them when, you know, I tried on, they give you the, you know, chicken cutlets, as they're called, of silicone, and you put them in your bra. And they kept saying, well, okay, no, that's the starter size. Try a bigger one. Try a bigger one. And, you know, looking down at myself, I could see completely how you could get seduced by it.
What did your visit to Las Vegas teach you about our unending quest for things that are big? You talk about going to the MGM Grand mega hotel. It used to be the biggest hotel in the world.
Right, now just in the country, in North America.
It sounded pretty tacky to me and also overwhelming. How did you experience it?
I was lost the entire time, literally lost, trying to navigate the complex. And the whole time I thought, this is so ridiculous that we would think we should build a hotel this big. It has 5,000 rooms. 7 out of 10 of the country's largest hotels are all in Vegas on that 2-mile strip of, you know, of the strip. And I just thought it seemed ridiculous and excessive. But then in reading, you know, some research and talking to one of the, you know, management heads of the MGM Grand, they're filled almost to capacity, like in the 90 percentile. Almost all of the time. So some of the times we go big is practical, and that really surprised me. I thought there's no way this is practical. But in that case, they need places, you know, for people to stay. And instead of, you know, building tons of smaller hotels, they decided to build one big complex.
And you ran into a couple who come there frequently and like it.
Yeah, a lot of people I talk to there don't leave the complex because, you know, there are 30-something restaurants, there's 20-something bars, there's 6 pools, there's a casino, there are, you know, 2 live shows. And a lot of people said they come because it's the biggest, because it means that once they learn it, they can just come back and don't have to leave the hotel complex.
Despite continuing crises over the availability and price of oil, And despite the proven harm to the environment of our driving such big cars, Americans seem to be as in love with, aren't they as in love with big cars as they were in the 50s and 60s?
I think so. And basically, whenever we've had a sort of traumatic event like World War II or 9/11, the way we come back from it is we get big cars. And I think a lot of that, I understand the appeal is the feeling of safety and security. Like after 9/11, Hummer sales shot up. They could not keep them on the lots at dealerships. People were bidding above sticker prices. But then when gas prices went up to above $3 a gallon, they couldn't move those big SUVs, and instead compact cars and hybrids were selling really well.
Is the Hummer still for sale? Are they still selling them?
The Hummers are going out of production,
Okay.
but they had 3 iterations, the Hummer, the H2, and the H3. And the people who drive them, it's almost cultish. I talked to people from the Hummer Club of America who said, this is our right as Americans. And that was echoed by the Bush administration.
Just like our right to carry guns and to put the hound dog in the back of the
and
Hummer.
giving huge tax cuts. You know, you could almost write off an entire Hummer if you used it for
Really?
business. Yeah.
Something sick about that. You write about your visit to one of the big box stores. You didn't say which one. Box stores which are hugely popular in the suburbs. You know, again, to me, they appear overwhelming, and the quality of the products is poor. Why are they popular?
They're popular because they do give you a deal. You can't really dispute that because, you know, of economy of scale. A store like Walmart sells the same products at about 15% less. And that makes a big financial difference to people. If you shop there for all your groceries and cleaning supplies and clothes for a year, that could make a big difference to a family's income or spending. So I totally understand that, but once I started researching the impact on the community that shopping at a big box store has, it was startling, and to me, not worth the high cost is not worth the 15% you
Because
save.
they run away a lot of the local businesses.
Definitely.
And they don't, you said, bring about greater jobs. I mean, you probably lose more than you
do.
gain. They also have a really bad reputation for treating their own employees poorly, no health care. I remember the Barbara Ehrenreich book, you know, where the Walmart salesperson who could not afford to buy the little shirt that Walmart sold, you know, because she didn't make enough money.
Right. I mean, the unemployment rate goes up when big box stores come into town, and the jobs that they do create are usually low-income jobs with not a whole lot of upward mobility. So it's
Right.
not great for the community. And also the money that they make, if it was a mom and pop shop and they needed to, you know, get a banner printed, they might go to a local printing company and sort of funnel that money back into the local economy. But a big national chain is not going to do that.
You wrote about going to see, before I even go to that, one result, obviously, of all this consumption is that we're creating a whole lot of garbage
Definitely.
that has to be dumped somewhere. And you talked about going to the landfill. So where are we going to put all this? It's just going to, you know, at some point.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was one of those people. It's especially easy living in New York, but also when I lived in the suburbs. You haul your garbage up to the top of your driveway or the street, and it disappears. And you don't really think about where it goes again. And we each make about 4 pounds of trash a week. But it's hard to think about the sort of where it goes because you don't see it. There's that strong not in my backyard feeling. So I decided to sort of track down where our garbage is going to, and I went to the biggest landfill in the country, which is in California. And I was completely freaked out about every wrapper and every piece of packaging that I created for weeks afterwards, because we really have not solved the problem at all. We are not
Just shipping it somewhere else.
Right, we're just moving it somewhere else. We're not composting nearly enough. A large percentage of what's in landfills is food waste and yard waste. And we are just creating this huge pile of waste that mostly we're dumping in the ocean or we're burying.
I was stunned to hear about this huge island of garbage
Yeah,
that
floating
exists
in the middle of the
Pacific Ocean. My goodness.
It's the size of Texas.
Maybe they'll turn into a resort on it. Has anything that you learned in the course of writing this book made you conduct your own life differently?
definitely. I would say, the first thing I did was get rid of the SUV and decide to take public transportation when I could, and when I couldn't, I do Zipcar, which is one of those like car sharing services. And I also stopped shopping at big box stores as my norm. I, really try not to, because when I realized, the impact on my own community, I decided I don't want to contribute to that. So those have been the main ways. And I've also gone back to being a vegetarian to try to lessen my impact a little bit.
Now, if we can just reconvert your parents.
Right. They have said after, reading the book that, they hadn't thought of it like that, and maybe they'll also reconsider going small again.
Stay tuned. We're out of time. I want to thank Sarah Wexler, author of Living Large, From SUVs to Double Ds, Why Going Bigger Isn't Going Better. It's just been published by St. Martin's Press. For the City University of New York and 1 to 1, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. If there are any people you'd like to hear from or topics you'd like us to explore, please let us know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.